Morning, everyone. Just wanted to do this week's recap of the message that we did on Sunday, which I called Enrich Our Relationships and Be More Missional. I basically started off by reading from a book called Simple Life and described a family situation with a wife and a husband and a few kids, and just taught. And this excerpt that I read just described what so many of us go through, where we're just so busy running. We're working a lot. We're running the kids here and there, and we want to simplify our lives. And probably the biggest thing we can do is try to manage our time well. But this week's theme was on relationships, so I encouraged us to be thinking about that one relationship. I mean, I'm sure many of us could think of several relationships that could need work, but I just wanted us to pick one and be thinking about what are the things that are going right in that relationship, whether it's a parenting relationship, whether it's with your siblings, your friends, your parents, your coworkers, whomever. But when you pick that relationship, focus on a few things that are going well with it, because I feel like this makes us focus on the good in people, and especially like in a marriage situation where if things aren't going very well right now, it's too easy to get drawn into that which isn't working, and that's all we think about. So this exercise is to say, hey, choose 3 things that you really appreciate about the other person. And I think you'll find this to be a very affirming thing when you share with the other person. But beyond that, also be thinking about, what take responsibility. So what behavior are you doing that if you stopped it, it would make a big difference? Maybe you're being negative, maybe you're withdrawing, maybe you're being insensitive, whatever it might be. But decide today not to do that any longer, because we talked about the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So let's not do that. And instead of doing that, let's replace it. And what's the one thing that we can start doing on a very small basis that would enrich the relationship? It could be writing a card, going out for a cup of coffee, apologizing, words of affirmation, spending time together, whatever it might be. But choose that one thing that you can start doing just to get the momentum going for you. And I feel like that will help enrich your relationships. Okay, so that was a very practical part of the teaching. And then I switch it over to the idea of being missional, because I think so many times we get so consumed with just taking care of our own lives, with our own families and putting food on the table and all that stuff, that we never get to this other side that the scriptures call us to, where it says love our neighbor and to really make a difference in other people's lives. And how are we going to do that if we're not intentional? If we don't intentionally carve out time, we'll probably never get there. And I started off by reading a strange story to highlight this. And it's a story of when Jesus was anointed by, it says, a sinful woman who was a prostitute. And he goes to the Pharisee's house, whose name is Simon. So you have Simon, a prostitute, and Jesus. And what I wanted us to see as a church was that 2 kingdoms were colliding. The Pharisee Simon was trying to see, is Jesus a true prophet? Because if he was, this was validating the kingdom in which they were expecting. But Jesus was coming in and saying, no, the kingdom you're expecting, I'm not coming in with that at all. I'm not coming in with force. I'm not coming in to overthrow a government. I'm coming in to lay down my life. I'm coming in to serve. I'm coming in to forgive, to show compassion, to love, to show generosity, all of these things. And so this story takes the 2 kingdoms colliding together, because in that day, when someone would come in as a guest, the host was supposed to greet them with a kiss on the cheek. They were supposed to wash their feet. And Simon did none of that when Jesus came in. And yet this uninvited guest, the prostitute, knowing Jesus, knowing his forgiveness, knowing his love, knowing that he even noticed her, that's key. Do we notice the people around us that are in pain, that are hurting, that no longer love themselves? I taught the church, how do you get to the place where you're prostituting yourself? That's a long road, and a painful road, and there's a loss of identity, there's a loss of self in that. And so when this person sees Jesus and knows that her life has been changed because of his radical love, because of his acceptance of her, the person, not of what she's been doing, but of who she is as a person. And so often we get caught up in what the people are doing versus seeing them as people. And when she comes in, she's weeping so much that she falls at his feet and washes Jesus' feet with her own tears and pours perfume on his feet. And Jesus is making a point to Simon and saying, look, who's forgiven most and who loves more, a person who has everything or the person who has been forgiven much. And so this was a radical way for Jesus to share with us and say, we have to figure out how to get our lives to free up the time so that we can enter into other people's lives. We can enter into other people's pain. And I just want to encourage us to be thinking about that. Like, what ways can you do that? We talk about spending time with those that don't go to church, those that might not be Christians, but that they're friends, and that you want to build that relationship. So I call it having intentional table talk. Maybe just go out for a cup of coffee on a regular basis. Maybe you have them over for dinner on a regular basis, but you're doing something to spend time with those that don't know Christ yet. And then I said, I didn't even say this in the teaching, but I call it a party with a purpose. And I think that's important, that maybe you have a group of people that you associate with, and they can just come over the house and have a great time, have food, have some drink, but then put something on it. Like, what's the topic of discussion that might be intriguing to them? And then just simply meet the needs around you. Sometimes we think it's got to be these grandiose things, and really, if we see with our eyes and open our eyes, we'll see things right around us, and then be willing to meet those needs. And then lastly, bring it into your ordinary life. Be missional in your everyday life. I don't care what it is. We just did the backpacks for the homeless. We're wrapping that up. But what if you owned your own barber salon and you said to anyone that came in, we're doing these backpacks. What if you are a nurse and you go into the hospital and you bring 10 backpacks for you and just talk about it and say, hey, if anyone would like to do this, we'd love to have you join us. We can be missional in very creative ways. We just have to give it the time to do it. I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you Sunday.